The man known to history as John Hunter was not a rebel. He was not a tyrant. He was not a revolutionary. But in the violent politics of early Australia, he may have been something far more dangerous. He tried to take power away from the men who controlled the colony's rum, and they made sure he paid for it. The governor the rum empire wanted gone. In 1795, a man arrived in Sydney with authority, but not power. His name was John Hunter, and within 5 years he would be forced out of office, not by rebellion, but by rum. He was a boy growing up in the port town of Leith, Scotland. Born in 1737, he entered a world defined by ships. Leith was not a quiet rural village. It was a working harbour, a place of merchants, sailors, cargo, and ambition. Hunter's father was a merchant sea captain, a practical man, a man whose livelihood depended on the ocean. Growing up around docks and vessels, young John would have seen firsthand what maritime life meant: discipline, risk, structure, and hierarchy. The sea was not romantic, it was survival. Very little is recorded about Hunter's childhood in detail. There are no dramatic memoirs, no personal confessions, no childhood letters describing ambition. But his path suggests influence. In an era when sons often followed their father's trades, Hunter entered the Royal Navy while still young. It was a logical step, and a dangerous one. By the time the 7 Years' War erupted in 1756, Hunter was already serving in the Navy. The conflict was global. Britain and France were fighting not just in Europe, but in North America, the Caribbean, India, and across the seas. Some historians consider it the first true world war. For naval officers, it was brutal and relentless. Hunter served aboard British warships during this period, gaining experience in fleet operations, blockades, and maritime warfare. The British Navy's strategy relied heavily on cutting off French trade routes and projecting power through control of the sea. Young officers like Hunter learned quickly. Discipline was survival. Procedure prevented chaos. Mistakes meant death. Though Hunter did not become a famous war hero of the conflict, the 7 Years' War shaped him. It forged his belief in command structures. It reinforced his trust in hierarchy. It taught him that systems work if men follow orders. That mindset would define him for the rest of his life. After the 7 Years' War, Hunter continued his naval career, serving during the American War of Independence. By then, he was no inexperienced sailor. He was seasoned, methodical, calm under pressure. The Navy became his identity. There is no record of Hunter marrying young or living a reckless life ashore. His reputation remained professional, and while the exact dates of his parents' deaths are not clearly documented in surviving mainstream records, it is widely accepted that Hunter outlived them. There is no dramatic family collapse that propelled him into ambition, no scandal that drove him forward. His life appears steady, structured, built on maritime discipline rather than personal tragedy, which makes what happened later in New South Wales even more striking. Because John Hunter understood naval war, he understood fleets, he understood command. But colonial politics, that was a different battlefield entirely. I would like to take a moment to tell you I'm starting a series of all Aussie governors from landing to Federation every Friday, and I post one short every day teaching you about Aussie history from the people. The media don't often tell you because I think all Aussies should know our own history, from convicts, settlers, big events like the Eureka Stockade and much more. And if you would like to see this, think about subscribing because you might not find me after this. Hunter was not political. He was procedural. He believed systems worked if men followed them. That belief would define his downfall. In 1786, Hunter became second captain of HMS Sirius, the flagship of the First Fleet under Governor Arthur Phillip. When the fleet reached Sydney Cove in 1788, it was less a settlement, more a gamble. Food was scarce, the soil was unreliable, isolation was absolute. Hunter mapped coastlines, surveyed harbours, recorded details. He was methodical. Then in 1790, disaster struck. HMS Sirius was wrecked on Norfolk Island, the colony's lifeline gone. The loss nearly pushed the settlement into starvation. Hunter survived it, but he left Australia soon after, returning to Britain with experience and a reputation for steadiness. That steadiness would later make him governor. By the time Hunter returned in 1795 as the second governor of New South Wales, the colony had changed. It wasn't starving anymore, it was corrupt. The New South Wales Corps, the military regiment stationed in the colony, had discovered something powerful. There was almost no official currency, so they made rum the currency. They controlled imports, they controlled trade, they controlled land. Officers grew wealthy, influence flowed through barrels of alcohol, and the governor, he was supposed to look the other way. Hunter didn't. He attempted regulation. He tried to break monopolies. He sought to stabilize prices. He believed the colony should be governed, not exploited. But he underestimated something critical. Authority on paper means nothing if powerful men refuse to obey it. The officers of the Corps did not confront him openly. They undermined him quietly. Orders were ignored. Private trading continued. Letters were sent back to London. Accusations of incompetence, whispers of weak leadership, claims that Hunter lacked control. And in an empire run by correspondence, narrative mattered more than truth. Hunter was a naval officer trying to fight a political war. He expected discipline. He encountered ambition. He made compromises, hoping to stabilise the colony. The New South Wales Corps was raised in Britain in 1789 after the First Fleet Marines were withdrawn. Its first commanding officer was Francis Grose. After Grose returned to England in 1794, command passed to William Paterson. Paterson was the official head of the Corps during most of Hunter's governorship. He was not as aggressive as MacArthur, but he allowed the system to continue. The power of the New South Wales Corps did not emerge by accident. It was built, officer by officer. After the First Fleet established the colony in 1788, the original Marines who had accompanied Governor Arthur Phillip were gradually withdrawn. Britain decided the settlement required a permanent military presence, so in 1789 a new regiment was formed specifically for service in New South Wales. It became known as the New South Wales Corps. Its first commander was Major Francis Grose. Under Grose, the Corps gained its initial taste of real authority. When Governor Phillip returned to England due to ill health in 1792, Grose effectively took control of the colony. And Grose made a crucial decision. He granted large land holdings to officers. He allowed extensive private trading. He relaxed restrictions on rum imports. In doing so, he set the precedent. Military officers could profit, and profit quickly. When Grose returned to Britain in 1794, command of the Corps passed to Lieutenant Colonel William Paterson. Paterson was a very different personality. He was educated, interested in natural science and botany, less openly confrontational, but he inherited a system already built on private trade and economic influence. By the time John Hunter arrived as governor in 1795, Paterson was the official head of the Corps. Technically, he answered to the governor. In practice, he commanded the only organised armed force in the colony. Paterson did not create the rum economy, but he did not dismantle it either. He allowed officers like John MacArthur to expand their land holdings. He tolerated private trading networks, and he rarely moved aggressively against his own men. This mattered. Because when Hunter attempted reform, he did not face isolated officers. He faced a regiment whose leadership had grown accustomed to autonomy. Paterson was not openly rebellious. He did not stage coups or publicly defy orders, but his loyalty to his officers came before his enthusiasm for reform, and that quiet alignment shaped the balance of power. Hunter governed from Government House. Paterson commanded the soldiers, and in a colony still fragile and distant from Britain, armed authority carried weight. By the time conflict intensified between Hunter and ambitious officers like MacArthur, the foundation had already been laid. The Corps had been allowed to grow powerful under Grose. It had been maintained under Paterson, and it now stood as an institution that did not easily yield control. Hunter found himself isolated. Each order required negotiation. Each reform sparked resistance. The Corps did not stage a rebellion. They fought through delay, through quiet refusal, through influence, and most dangerously, through letters. Detailed complaints were sent to London, accusations of mismanagement, claims that Hunter lacked control, reports that the colony was unstable under his leadership. In a settlement months away from Britain, communication was slow, but decisive. Hunter tried to counter the narrative. He defended his actions. He argued that corruption was entrenched. but he was fighting men who understood colonial power better than he did. They did not need to overthrow him, they only needed to convince London he was ineffective, and they succeeded. The struggle between Hunter and the Corps was not a battlefield confrontation, it was a power contest. Civil governance versus military influence, regulation versus profit. Hunter governed by commission from the Crown. The Corps operated through economic dominance. When London reviewed the reports, they did not see a governor fighting corruption, they saw disorder. And in 1800, John Hunter was recalled. The Corps remained. MacArthur remained. The rum trade remained. The struggle had ended without gunfire, but the result was clear. In early New South Wales, military influence outweighed civil authority, and Hunter had lost. Even though his governorship ended in controversy, John Hunter did achieve meaningful reforms during his time in office. He inherited a fragile colony still finding its footing, economically unstable, socially divided, and increasingly dominated by private interests. One of Hunter's consistent goals was agricultural stability. He encouraged farming expansion beyond Sydney Cove, supporting settlers along the Hawkesbury River. This was crucial. The colony had nearly starved in its early years, and Hunter understood that long-term survival depended on local food production. He pushed for land to be worked productively, rather than hoarded purely for speculation. He promoted self-sufficiency. And under his administration, agricultural output improved. Hunter also supported exploration and mapping. As a naval officer by training, he valued accurate surveys and geographic knowledge. He encouraged further charting of the coastline and inland regions, strengthening the colony's strategic understanding of its surroundings. Trade regulation, though controversial, was another of his attempts at reform. Hunter did not seek to destroy commerce. He sought to stabilize it. He tried to prevent extreme monopolies. He attempted to limit the unchecked use of rum as currency. His efforts may have angered powerful officers, but they reflected a belief that civil order mattered more than private profit. He also maintained relatively stable relations with Britain's broader imperial administration. Despite internal tension, the colony did not collapse under his watch. There was no armed uprising during his term, no military coup, that would come later. In many ways, Hunter held a volatile system together longer than history often credits him for. He governed during a transitional period, when New South Wales was shifting from a survival outpost to a contested economic settlement. And while he ultimately lost the political battle against the New South Wales Corps, he did not abandon his principles. He believed governors should govern. He believed military power should not dictate civilian life. And he attempted, however imperfectly, to steer the colony toward lawful administration. Even though his governorship ended in tragedy, John Hunter did leave behind foundations in agriculture, exploration, and civil authority that shaped the colony's future. His failure was political, but his intentions were administrative. And in early Australian history, that distinction matters. Hunter wasn't defeated because he was evil. He wasn't overthrown because he was tyrannical. He was removed because he tried to limit men who profited from chaos. And in a colony where rum was currency and influence was private, that made him dangerous. The first years of Australia were not just about convicts and exploration. They were about control, about who truly governed. And sometimes the most important figures are not the loudest, but the ones who saw the storm coming and tried to stop it. John Hunter was one of them.
Thanks for watching. Aussie Breakdowns for more. Please like and subscribe. Thanks.